These are the three models. Raj, I'm handing over the microphone to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's awesome that to have you all. Sylvia, as always, a first-rate show. I really think that it's a one of the most terrific topics, I think, in this entire world as the law is changing before our very eyes. I think this set of questions and these management models are really ripe for incredible discussion. So we'll just jump in, and why don't I right now, Sylvia, of course, gave name and title. I won't repeat that, but Adrienne, Bill, and April are absolutely top-notch panel. And so why don't I go ahead and just go in that order. Adrienne, Bill, and April, please just take 1 minute and give, rather than just obviously your title, your perspective and the relevant experience about these topics. And we'll just go in that order, and then we'll jump in with the first poll question. So Adrienne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Raj. Hi, everyone. My name is Adrienne Fox, and I apologize. I'm having some technology issues, so you see my voice on one screen and my picture on another, so apologies for that. I've been with procurement in Novartis for about 12 years now, but in procurement in general for about 20. I focus on legal services today, but prior to that have been in other categories. I'm very passionate about data. I have been for a long time, and it's always been a big part of the work I do prior to procurement as well as in procurement. Prior to procurement, I was in legal, so happy to be here and help with the discussion and share thoughts. So thank you.
Great, Bill.
It would help if I unmuted myself. My name is Bill NOVOMISLE. I have been in the legal operations space for about a decade. I've held roles on the buy side as a legal operations director, including my current role as legal operations director at Cresco Labs. I've also done similar work on the law firm side, where I've been a pricing director, and I've also founded a new law company as well as worked in new law, and I have worked in this space around the globe in the United States, in Canada, and across Asia Pacific, basically from Mumbai to Tokyo, with most points in between. So I think that I have a little bit of a broader holistic view, and I do think that data is critical to the goals we're trying to accomplish. And thank you for having me on this panel.
Awesome. April.
Hi, everyone. April SAVOY. I have been a legal counsel, dare I say, over 20 years. And so been procuring legal services for some time, particularly in the litigation management and analytics perspective, probably for about a decade, first at Nationwide, where I kind of manage litigation analytics there. And then as chief legal officer at a regional insurance company called Acceptance Insurance, where we stood up a legal operations department. And then most recently, for the last 6 months, at Norfolk Southern, where I oversee several functions, including the legal operations team that's focused on legal spend management. So I'm happy to be here as well.
Absolutely terrific. And I will say, we are 2 minutes ahead of schedule, Sylvia. So I just want that is, Bill has actually lived, if we had extra time, an interesting topic is Bill's art behind him. He has lived overseas. He's a man of many interests. And so we get to that if time permits. I neglected something very important, which is what the hell Bodhala is, for those of you who don't know. Maybe as the CEO of the business, I should do that. But Bodhala is, we're very excited about where we are as a business. So we are the leading analytics company that if you have an e-billing solution, it sits on top of that. But we are able to tell you really the should cost of what your legal spend is. So we have benchmarking. We have an AI machine learning set of algorithms that take your outside counsel spend, parse it, hygiene it, cleanse that dirty data from the law firms, the dirty data that's in your e-billing systems, and can spit out the efficiencies and inefficiencies in your legal spend. We're very proud to have April as a client of the companies in Norfolk Southern, and a great partner of ours. And we have many of the leading companies in many verticals. And we're a company headquartered out of New York and Ann Arbor, Michigan, where our data science team sits, and we're growing strongly. And I think that's a reflection not just of Bodhala's strength, but of this market in general. And if I could kind of take the Bodhala hat off for a second, many of us have obviously been lawyers or been in this space for a long time. I think I might just give you a little bit of perspective from sort of an investor hat on, which is, I think it's $1.5 billion has been new, fresh money into legal tech in the last year and a half. The M&A activity in our sector is heating up quite a lot. I will be very blunt about it. Legal was always a stepchild in the technology sector. Viewed as difficult buyers, viewed as difficult to raise money, and so on. That is changing very, very rapidly. And we often use that metaphor that the glaciers are melting or the dam is bursting, whatever natural disaster you like to pick for the day. That's what's happening in our sector. And I was on a webinar even last week talking about what is some people are calling the great unbundling, which is, why am I just shipping everything off to a law firm for them to do A to Z? And this happens in many, many other spend categories. So if you look at the journey that's happened in transportation, we all know with ride sharing, if you look at healthcare, if you look at marketing, if you look at advertising, all of these spend categories in a corporate enterprise inevitably must face innovation and disruption. And there's winners and losers in that. And I think there's a growing realization that the legal world, which has been frankly sitting in a bit of its own cocoon, is no longer able to sit there. So a lot of exciting things happening in that front, and Bodhala is very happy to play a role of optimizing that outside counsel spend management. So without further ado, Sylvia, let's get to the first polling question, which is, let's ask the audience, who manages your law firm relationships? Sounds like a simple question, but is actually quite complex when you dig down. So Sylvia, how long do we let people answer?
Well, I'd say about a minute or so. I think that
about a minute. Okay. Do you
one question? So,
yeah. Do you actually play the Jeopardy theme song during this, Sylvia?
If you can sing it, I don't think I've ever watched it, so I don't know how to sing it. So if anyone wants to volunteer, Adrienne, April.
No. Yeah,
I will try to look it up in the meantime online. Okay, so people have started to vote. So if you haven't already voted in your buyer of legal services, please do so. We'll leave it on for another 10 seconds or so.
Great. So while you're voting, obviously, I think at this time we'll maybe go in reverse order. We'll go sort of April, Bill, Adrienne. Would love to get your views on this larger. Obviously, we'll look at the poll results and we'll see what comes back. So we're looking at the poll results. The legal department alone with a clear majority here. Legal and anyone in the business together. Oh, interestingly, so actually less of a maybe less of a role than maybe expected for procurement, and a clear majority that legal is handling outside counsel solely. Really interesting poll results there. And so maybe I'd ask April, and then we'll go April, Bill, and Adrienne to kick things off. Before you do, April, the screen that all of you see in front of you, something that our panelists are familiar with, which is what we call these 3 management models. Nothing too complex here, but still a helpful framework for thinking about this, which is procurement-led. I won't read to you, but you can obviously see where that's a procurement foot forward, a legal ops-led, and then that in-house counsel-led, which I think it's fair to say the third bucket, the third model, is perhaps the default and the traditional way that we've kind of thought about legal departments. And as I said, and I think all the panels would agree, things are changing fairly rapidly. So without further ado, a few minutes from you, April, Bill, and Adrienne, in that order, on the poll results and basically that notion of managing law firm relationship generally.
I mean, my reflection on the poll results is that they seem to reflect my understanding of how the industry is working. It was not surprising at all. I think the business tends to think that the law department has the best sense of what services should be received from outside law firms and the best ability to manage for quality, and has the aptitude, I guess, to manage the rates. They're held accountable for how much they spend in their budget. So it makes sense. With that accountability comes the authority to manage those firms. So that makes sense to me. I do think that clients do often influence to some degree firms that are selected based on prior relationships or interactions with those firms. And they certainly do give you feedback on what they think the firm provides from time to time. And I think a good law department does, give on a certainly high value, bet the company case, gives people in the business some access to outside counsel so that they know who they are. And that helps them because they can say, hey, I really think we need to get the best and brightest on this. And it helps to validate the use of outside counsel, which, as you know, in the industry, there's pressure more and more to bring things in-house, to do more with less. And that includes less outside counsel spend. So I think that partnership is a good one. But in general, I do see procurement not having as much of an impact on the purchasing and the engagement of outside counsel. And that's kind of, they control every other part of the business, every other contracting relationship, but legal spend really is managed by in-house law departments.
And before Bill speaks, if I might just ask you, April, you have legal operations in your title, and obviously you're still relatively new to Norfolk Southern. Maybe you could hum a couple bars on sort of like why that's, maybe a couple years ago that wouldn't have been in your title when the CLO hired you there. Maybe like why is that there, and how does that, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think increasingly legal departments are being viewed as in-house business units and consultants, right? And so they have to demonstrate their value, their continuous value to the business. And if the value is only going to be viewed as largely they're viewed as a cost center, right? That provides value, but a cost center. And so I think you're seeing CLOs try to change that value proposition by showing kind of the relationship values they can bring, the commercial revenue values they can bring, but also the expense management value they can bring, like every other business unit in the department. And so legal operations is poised to run the legal department like a business, like the rest of the company. And so that means we look at our own P&L, we look at our expenses, we look at, ways we can, part of my responsibility is to run an insurance captive, and that captive generates revenue. So we manage the revenue that we bring in the organization. We optimize the relationships. We decide whether we have too many relationships and that's costing us money. We look at our bills, all the bills that come in, and we try to, with Bodhala's help, refine that process so that we're making sure there's no leakage against our billing guidelines. And so I think there's a continuous pressure for legal departments, if not to be more lean, to be more efficient financially and qualitatively. And so that's why those departments are there.
Terrific. Bill, over to you. And let me, before you kick off, pose a little bit of a question to you, which is April got at it, sort of the procurement relationship with legal. I'm just going to say a little bit the elephant in the room. I think historically they've hated each other. It's been cats and dogs, right? It was like procurement, get the hell out of my business. We're lawyers, we're fancy, we know our stuff. You go back to doing, computer monitor procurement, and then it's probably procurement looking. Did we just lose Bill? So I think the candid questions scared him off. No, I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say this was quite shocking for Bill. No, I know that.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll tee that right over to you, Adrienne. No big deal. Bill will come right back on. So Adrienne, you're from the non-lawyer side of the house, and procurement, let's be honest, looks at legal and says, you people give away money hand over fist. You hire your friends, you overpay them. You don't know a business value if it hits you in the face. So, speak to that.
We don't say those words. I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure
Yeah,
you
we
hear me
got
okay.
you. We got you.
Okay.
You sound great.
It's
and by
funny.
the way, awesome book in the background.
Thank you. I was chuckling when you were saying that and happy that I wasn't going next, but I guess Bill hit the end button instead of the mute button.
Yeah, he hit the escape chute.
So actually, it's really interesting because I will say that when you look at the three models here and just in general, I would say that maybe 15 years ago, at least at Novartis where I sit, that was probably some discussion that someone said, hey, someone in procurement said, why don't we work with legal? And legal would always say, we don't work with procurement. They would put their hand up. That has changed dramatically in the past 10 years for us. And I think that other companies are definitely getting there as well. I definitely agree with what April said, that there is no doubt legal owns the decision to engage outside counsel and service providers. They also own the decision itself on who they engage. What I would say is, from my perspective, and when I look at these three models, I think that there is a hybrid across the three that makes sense for companies like Novartis, and then other companies that are looking to really enable, as what April said about efficiency and well-managed cost. That's where you can use procurement as your partner, or I shouldn't say use, but that's where procurement is a partner and an enabler to legal. Legal operations is a key piece there as well because they hold the data. So the question is, does the procurement function sit in legal ops or is it a separate organization? The idea would be is that the best practice in my mind is really a hybrid where legal will always, the lawyers will always own the decision to engage external and who they engage. What I do and what procurement can do is, as well as legal ops, is we use the data, we use the history, we use the sourcing process to enable the best choice for that. And that's one of the things I work on day in and day out now, is really doing RFPs for litigations and other projects where I'm showing the value of the difference of the firms, the different values across them. But from a strategy and a legal content perspective, I stay out of that. What I can do is make recommendations based on what I see as well as pricing, and I'm the one who drives price. But in general, they are always the ones in the driver's seat as far as decision making.
Terrific. Go ahead, April. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's a valuable point. And if legal ops does not have someone, I think the value of legal ops is what I will say is it kind of objectifies the decision-making process with regard to which firm is selected and broadens the decision-making factors beyond relationship and expertise to a kind of cost model. Right. So it is true that most lawyers, they want to work with the people who have gotten them great results in the past, that are well known in the industry, and who they believe will storm the hill for them, and really invest in them and their success. And those are important factors, quite frankly, but they're not the only ones. And there are many firms that could get you those quality results. And so what I think what Adrienne's talking about, those factors that she brings, is kind of a standardized process of evaluating those firms on objective levels through an RFP, evaluating the costs, and then with the help of industry tools, benchmark the fees that you're getting against the fees that have been submitted to make sure that you are getting a competitive price for the firm that you want to use. And that expertise in the past, I think, existed in procurement. I mean, they've had that expertise for a long time. I think legal operations teams are increasingly trying to gather those kind of skill sets and put them in a legal ops department. But your point, Adrienne, about needing to have those kind of tools and expertise in order to evaluate a firm before they're selected is absolutely true. And that's where I think procurement was definitely ahead of the legal ops function for some time.
That's great.
And I can add one thing, Raj, too, is that to that point, the one thing that we've been doing, and I think this is something that procurement does in many other spend categories well, we're using tools like Bodhala and others that are out there that do the data analysis. It's the should cost that really is telling for a legal department. That when we look at our historical data and we know that a particular type of litigation should cost about this much, then we know whether or not we're getting competitive bids. Whereas in the past, we really didn't have that. And that's the hard part, is to really dig deep and digest and dissect the data that's in our e-billing. And we have years of e-billing data, but the fact is, can we make sense of it? And that's where these data-driven points will come in handy in not only the actual current RFP that you might be working on, but the overarching strategic relationships with firms and how they've been doing, whether it's negotiated rates, whether it's a cost of a particular type of work, and how they're managing their work, frankly, to the efficiency point that you made before. Is it's really important of looking at who's working on our matters and how that's managed well. The only way we can do that was with great data.
So, well, awesome segue. Bill is back. He took a rip in the space-time continuum. Where'd you go, Bill? I mean, you had to go run an errand?
If only I knew. Apparently, technology is not being my friend this morning, but I'm
No
sure
problem.
I'll catch the relationship up.
So, Bill, just to catch you up, you've been here for a couple minutes. You heard those great comments from April and Adrienne. Just a minute about sort of more generally your view on, before you dropped, I was sort of setting up that dialectic between, historically Adrienne and April agreed, we all could agree, procurement, legal, Pepsi, Coke, dog, cat, like, whoa, different worlds. It's clearly not the case anymore. And then if you could maybe talk about that, but also pick up where Adrienne just left off, which is let's have some discussion around data. Obviously, data is the key to everything. April suggested data points she uses. Adrienne's talking about making sense of that data that comes out of e-billing, which I think we can all agree is still quite dirty, needs a lot of cleansing, needs a lot of apples to apples. So Bill, a couple minutes.
Yeah, so some high level views. I think that procurement and the legal department, whether it's operations or a lawyer themselves, each have to learn something from each other. I think that it's a very easy punching bag to go after the billable hour. We all know about its downsides and how it incentivizes inefficiency and blah, blah, blah. But I think that there is a undiscussed strength of the billable hour, and that is when you are on the billable hour, you have absolutely no need to scope a project. You do not need to define your deliverables. You do not need to define your timeline. You just kind of engage. You have some very broad, fluffy language about what this engagement is about, and then people can go off and they can start doing the work. It also allows for infinite amount of flexibility as things take twists and turns. You're still on the billable hour. You're buying time. You're not buying deliverables. You're not buying specified services. So as lawyers go through their journey from law school to apprenticeship to law firms and in-house, they never really learn the ability to scope and to have change scope orders or anything like that. However, in the procurement world, particularly procurement professionals with experience in services contracts, they know how to do this backwards and forwards. And that's why I'm a little bit agnostic as to where these sort of things sit, whether it's in procurement or whether it's in legal, because each needs to learn skill sets that the other has in order to start moving forward. Then you get to the question of data, and I'll pick that one up very briefly. I think that data is instructive and I think that it's critical, but I also think that when it comes to data, you need to understand what your ultimate goal is and what you are trying to accomplish. If you have no problem with the billable hour, if you have no problem with sort of classical legal engagements, and you are using your vendors, you're using your law firms as vendors, then I think the types of data that you're looking at is very much so on the matter level. It's very much so on defining what the work is, putting some basic parameters to describe the work so that you understand what the key cost drivers are. And that can be around, substantive area, the type of support that's being done, whether it's transactional or litigation, those types of factors, and driving benchmarking across that to see how your firms are performing. If, however, your ultimate goal is a rationalized legal supply chain where you're looking at the costs of legal technology, the costs of alternative legal service providers, whether it is flexible project-based contracting work, or it is, you know, outsourced managed legal services, all the way through to in-house expense as well as traditional law firm expense. You're going to be wanting to look at a different set of data. And then finally, if you're looking at getting away from the billable hour entirely, and your goal is cost predictability, then you want to be looking at even a third set of data so that you can start figuring out how you can not just unbundle, but also rebundle. And I'm happy to dive into what I mean by that. Legal services to sort of align incentives in how your outside counsel is engaged.
Great, Bill. Super appreciate it. There was a great question here from Lee about getting accruals and jurisdiction and so on. And what I'll do is actually, before we get to that, what I might ask is, let's go ahead and we have a second poll question. And thank you, Felicia. If you look at the chat for everybody, there's a nice point here from Felicia at Equifax. But let's go ahead and do the second poll question, which is your current approach to managing your legal spend. So a pretty, and don't mind the typo there in the fourth option. We lawyers don't do typos, but you know, obviously matter level analysis, vendor firm level, or timekeeper level. And please, please respond there. We'll get back to that in a second. And thanks again, Felicia, for the comment on the Zoom chat about that use case. That's a great one to actually understand that the arm's length, the kind of good cop, bad cop is helpful. Adrienne, do you want to just speak to Lee's question? You put an answer here in the Q&A chat very quickly.
Sure. Actually, what I highlighted for everyone is that beyond the billable hour, if you're not ready for strong, concise, fixed fees, what you can do is start looking at capped fees and do it in a phased approach that will align to your monthly or quarterly budgeting process. And that requires a lot of work on the scoping, as Raj mentioned earlier, that you really need to scope out the work that has to be done on the matter itself. And then basically you would have monthly meetings and a lot of project management around what's occurring in the work and what will need to be occur and where the money needs to come from and who's working on it, of course. And that really, a lot of that comes down to the firm managing their process and communicating it well, but also us and the attorneys saying, this is what you have to do. So you need a strong statement of work, you need a schedule, you need a budget, and some of the billing tools obviously can allow you to put those budgets in the tools and have messaging when you're either approaching budget, exceeding budget, et cetera. So we also have seen rollover amounts, cap fees with rollover.
Mm-hmm. Lee, I see that you're, is there anything more you wanted to say there on that question, Lee? I don't know, Sylvia, is Lee allowed to talk?
Yes.
Okay.
Lee, no. Can we hear you?
Yes, no, thank you, Raj. Thank you, Adrienne. That's, you know, I think a lot of those strategies are what are currently deployed. I was just curious if there's been any recent developments. Certainly a lot of it's getting the right data out of the system and being able to aggregate and segregate that information into its relevant buckets. But no, I think that's, you know, definitely what I wanted to hear.
You could also employ some legal project management tactics. I know it's still new in the industry, and I've been hoping that someday we can do that, but there are definitely legal project management tools and services out there that could help you with that, or professionals themselves that can, you know, second in for a project to do it for you.
You know, one of the things that we have a lot of our clients get a lot of success through are just report cards. And what we find is that a lot of people manually try to build these report cards. It sounds kind of easy, again, because the data, forget even the use of the word dirty, it's more that legal data is often unstructured. And so that apple-to-apple comparison is very, very difficult. So report cards, in our tool, we have found a lot of pickup on that, which is, hey, I just need that quick view so that I can have those QBRs and all those great communication tools that Adrienne's talking about in terms of active management. I've also been told by one of my colleagues that, I'm sorry, I guess the Zoom chat is only visible to the panelists. So I made cryptic references to what Felicia said. Equifax said, I wanted to add that Equifax used procurement to negotiate an agreement for our new litigation counsel. It was successful and provided the attorneys at Equifax have arm's length separation since Atlanta is a small world. So I think that's a point well taken. There is also a question here in the Q&A chat, which is great, about what tools would recommend for legal spend analysis. Obviously, I've got one in mind, but I'll put that one off to the side.
I just want to interject here for a second. I don't know if Felicia or Marie, if you'd like to make any further comments to your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for adding that. The last question that you did pose in the poll, I was going to comment at that we have a combination of factors. It's not based on matter, it's not based on law firm, and it's not based on one particular element. It's sort of a combination of elements depending on the type of law that we're going to outside counsel for. And I don't know if other people, there was no way of adding a comment to that poll.
Got it.
We're gonna share the results in a moment, so you can see what came out. And Marie?
No, it was more to get a few names of what tool would be recommended out there to have a look at them.
Great. Great. Well, why don't we feel free? Let's have a discussion of that. I will obviously say, sort of, and we'll talk about the poll results in a second. Bodhala sits there as an outside counsel intelligence tool. Obviously, what we know, we are not doing staffing, we're not doing consulting, we're not doing secondments and so on. And obviously, there's lots of companies that do various things. So April, Bill, Adrienne, if you want to jump in on any sort of other recommended tools or type them in the chat, feel free. Bill, go ahead.
I have to be careful. I don't want this to be viewed as any endorsement, and I don't get any kickbacks from anybody, but I will say this. I think that, your biggest players in the space are Counsel-led by LexisNexis, Legal Tracker which is formerly called Serengeti by Reuters. You've got Onnit that has a pretty popular platform out in California and starting to make deeper penetration. I think if you're in Asia Pacific, I think Lawcadia is a leader out there. One tool that I'm particularly partial to is Bright Flag, because I think it's got a much cleaner UI and UX than some of these older legacy tools. I should also mention Timemetrics T360 out there, and Mitratech are the kind of round out your biggest players. But I think that they're shifting. So some of these older legacy tools are more reliant on coding and UTBMS codes and are relying on leads format for the law firms to get them in there. Some of the more modern tools don't rely on that and use artificial intelligence to just take in a paper PDF that's uncoded and convert that unstructured data into structured, so that you can start seeing what's going on without relying on coding, which oftentimes is just garbage that's coming in from the law firms.
Yeah, actually, obviously, great name checks, Bill. There's 12 e-billers that comprise about 99% of the market. Bill name checks 7 of them. Obviously, some are newer, some are older. And what's really interesting is that where the hockey puck is going in this space is into insights and intelligence. So really what's happening is that e-billing traditionally really just offered up a tool for you to approve or disapprove or decline an invoice. And it was really a workflow tool for that. And obviously now a lot of folks, both from procurement and legal departments, want insights on that. And so you're seeing more players actually go into that realm. Obviously, that's what we focus on. And I think it Bill's exactly right, which is there is, I think, some frustration, frankly, that has had some of these legacy players, because there's a lot more innovation, as I mentioned at the top of the panel, and dollars going to R&D to make these tools better, better off. We do have some poll results, which is interesting result. So we have matter level analysis vendor at 59%, vendor firm level at 56, lawyer 44, and nobody, only 2% are saying they don't conduct. So appreciate the honesty there. So I think that, you know, quick reaction, maybe April, to anything you see in that poll result?
Well, I think it's interesting that, first of all, gathering data on any level is good. You got to start somewhere. I think increasingly getting more granular data by lawyer is important, because at the end of the day, I think instinctively lawyers hire lawyers, not firms. And lawyers are mobile and they move from firm to firm. And so, and I think increasingly, firms are getting better at leveraging their particularized strengths beyond the brand. So you can get high value work from mid-sized firms that don't have the big name brands. And so savvy legal departments are figuring that out and saying, I don't need to hire unless it's bet the company and somebody is visually looking at the firm name in order to kind of validate whatever work's done here. To get the basic everyday work done, you don't need the highest price firm. And so firms can create a lot of value in that space, and the data can show that in terms of there's a lot of AI analytics around you know, success rates of different firms in different jurisdictions in front of different courts. And then you can marry that with the rate level data to say which firm is just going to be, you know, pound for pound more efficient in this particular matter, in this particular case. I also think it's helpful, going back to something Adrienne said, you know, I'm agnostic on the billable rate or the AFA. I don't tend to favor one or the other, because at the end of the day, I do view it as an engagement for, you know, a quality service for a price. And to the extent that I have repeatable work that is right for whatever reason to be outsourced, I want to understand the unit costs associated with that work historically, even if that's based on a billable hour, but I want to understand how much I usually pay for that work all in, and then figure out when I'm evaluating a fee model from anyone who's bidding for it for, you know, consolidated work, how much they're going to charge me. And I'm just going to compare the two, and they can present it as time and materials, or they can present it as a flat fee, but I rarely will give them kind of a retainer per month model anymore. I try to granularize it as much as possible. How much, if I'm going to have a cap fee, how much you're going to pay for this type of work, you know, and what's going to be the max cap, as opposed to, you know, and if it's litigation, I might get a cap, and if it's non-litigation, I might get a cap, right? You know, so if the work is not, you know, let's take IP, if it doesn't traditionally turn into litigation, I'm going to get a cap for a certain type of work there. If it turns into litigation, or if it engages in a different phase, then I might get a cap for that. But I am trying to break, you know, down the costs in as granular level I can, so I can figure out how to be the most efficient. And I think that's what business does, right? And I think, again, increasingly, that's what law departments are being asked to do.
Terrific. There are a couple questions that have cropped up. Again, I don't know if in this chat the attendees can see it, but Chris Tenen asked, you know, like to hear more about the report cards that Raj mentioned. What are some high-level content components? So I've got to presume some other people. So let me answer that first, and then if any of the panelists have any input on what they'd like to see in a report card, anything you have internally. So at a Bodhala report card level, what I think our clients really like is that at a click of a button, not only is our data enriched with intelligence and it's cleansed, but it tells you, you know, very granular, you know, about 15 key components about everything that's happening inside that law firm. So yes, of course, the top billers, but also the average rates, the net effective rates, how much are write-offs versus discounts, trend lines across key matters, obviously rate benchmarking. So you can holistically see everything about that law firm. And one of the things that we find is actually that's really interesting is that oftentimes lawyers, that's the beauty of data, which you can't measure what you don't manage. They have all these gut instincts about how their law firms stack up. But in-line attorneys often are just doing it by gut instinct. And once they see data, they're like, oh, I love Johnny at Skadden. Johnny is awesome. I also love Billy at Weil Gotshal. I didn't realize Johnny was 28% more on unit cost than Billy. I'm fine if I don't use Johnny anymore. And suddenly the data like dissolves all of this like knee-jerk tension response. And everybody starts making, better decisions. Those are the kind of aspects of report cards. Anyone on the panelists do any of you use report cards right now?
Not at matter level yet. From an overall perspective within firm management, we're actually looking at it now because we've just had one full year of our panel program. And it's interesting to look at the different firms, not only the work they're getting, the work they're managing, and then obviously comparatively who does what. But that's the whole idea of matter level sourcing too, can help you really break open those doors to get the better data from different firms, and then obviously looking at your historical as well. I know I think Bill answered one question in here too.
Yeah.
I'll just highlight that we've actually had trouble looking at our past data and making sense of it. It's possible. The idea would be is how many controls you have on the firms and how they're billing. And this is something that we've changed a little bit recently on IP litigation, as well as what codes can be used, obviously managing block billing, et cetera, but really getting a little bit more controlled in how we're asking firms to bill so that the future data should be much more aligned to how we're setting up our SOWs and scope now. So
Terrific.
yeah, we can look at the past for sure, but the question is how much time and energy do you want to look in the past? I think it's absolutely worth it if you have the money or have a good analyst or are going to engage a service for it.
Well, let me suggest this because it would be negligent if I didn't. So what John asked and what Bill, mentions Bright Flag. So what John's question is actually directly in our sweet spot as well. I didn't realize that. But so many of our clients, actually, to Adrienne's point, we ingest the historical data regardless of whether or not you're on an e-billing tool. And so we actually might slightly, Adrienne, you were mentioning, hey, there's some difficulty and friction with that historical data. So I take your point, which is, hey, why go backwards? Actually, we can take 5-10 years data. We do it routinely. Every day we take probably $100 million of data from various clients. So the retrospective, we actually would disagree with the notion, even in Bill's answer, of the notion that it's, quote, retrospective. We just grab the data. And one of the things we do is we can extract it from the law firm time and billing system, not just an e-billing tool. So that is a huge kind of breakthrough in the industry. So we can grab that historical data. In fact, most of our clients, and as we're working even with April, we're taking historical data, running the algorithms on it to give you the insights to then set up, as Adrienne said, the guardrails for how you manage it moving forward. So we would actually suggest, to John's question, that historical data in our view has gold in it, because that is giving you the pattern analysis of what's happening inside your culture and your behavior to actually to move it forward.
Can I speak to that a little bit? So one of the reasons why we were excited to engage Bodhala is because we have billing guidelines, as most companies do, but we didn't have a sense for which ones were being actively enforced, especially since we weren't, we didn't embed and automate our rejection process through our e-billing tool as readily, because we were just nervous. We were nervous that we would over-reject and create a high appeal process that would create friction in the quality of work and friction with our lawyers, right? But we're trying to evolve that view and figure out what are some areas that are kind of low-hanging fruit, where we know that people aren't adhering to the billing guidelines. We know that our lawyers who we support would not want that leakage for any reason. And what can we automate? And so we are excited to use Bodhala to look at our past data to see that. And we've already uncovered there's some block billing that's just really obviously shouldn't be allowed, right? And you don't want somebody, if you see a particular attorney blocking 4-6 hours a day, right? That's something to be flagged, right? And to be evaluated, right? If you see attorneys submitting fee increases that have not been approved previously through another process, but they're just putting them in and seeing if they can get it, right? And we're not catching it. These are the things that we want to be able to analyze in our past data as well as going forward. Now, once you've paid a client, you know, it's real hard. Possession is 3/4 the law, right? So once you've paid a client, they're going to keep that money. But we know that if we have some, you know, preferred clients where we give multi-millions of dollars worth of business, we can go back and say, we've evaluated the last 5 years and see that even though your official rates are X, you've been charging us at a blended rate that's far exceeds that. We think maybe we should get some of that back in good faith, right? So that's the kinds of ways that I think you can leverage historical data in the future to strengthen and clarify your relationships with some of your larger firms.
Terrific, April. We have just about 10 minutes left, and we have 2 awesome questions. Again, one I think is in the chat and may not be visible to everybody, which is how do you, from Peter, and I'm sorry I don't have your last name, Peter, but how do you then act on the cost savings that the analysis identifies, which is a great question. So why don't we actually tackle that one, and then we'll get over to Richard's question from CIBC. Richard, by the way, is a noted author in the space. And a person who's a great thought leader on it. So, you know, let me go first, and obviously the panel should absolutely weigh in here, because in my view, this is almost, to date myself, the $64,000 question, which is a lot of the tools, you know, obviously I'll say, I think Bodhala can offer up insights we know you can't get elsewhere from any other vendor, from any other piece of data. However, we're not the client, we're a data vendor. You must do something with this data. And so actioning those insights, I'll go first, and then obviously love the panel, which is our clients go on journeys. April just suggested the journey we're on with Norfolk Southern. We have generally about 3 journey tracks that we've seen over all of our years of doing this and the many, many accounts that we have. But those might not be for everybody. And so one of the things I will say is that it's really, I think, always a question of change management. And for Adrienne, Bill, and April, obviously the question is going to be, what kind of change management journey do you have on? Are you ready to hammer law firms? Are you ready to be very hands-off? How do you actually action this? Adrienne, you mentioned all that constant communication. So let's just go quickly. Adrienne, Bill, then April. How do you actually take analysis and do something with it?
So there's a couple things there. I think you have to really find the golden nugget in the analysis that's going to resonate with the particular attorney or even legal operations, chief legal operations. It's going to be able to help make the change. And this is all what it comes down to, is change management. Is how where do you want to be, and how does the data support that? So finding whether it's a should cost analysis, finding where 2 firms are doing similar work and the price is very variant, but the quality of work is great, to show examples of where we could change that would make an impact to the business and lowering costs, and also possibly getting same great results. In that it's almost a change management initiative. I mean, so the data's there. Obviously, number 1 priority is getting the good quality legal service and expertise. Price comes next, but when the quality and expertise is the same, price does matter. And so the question then becomes, is also company culture matters, of how they fit with the different attorneys working together. So just using the different data points to show the true examples of what could have been done differently in a debrief process, or in a proactive go forward, use the past data to show, this is what we did, this is what we could do. Let's try that next time. Some of that may include deeper data analysis or sourcing and project management.
Good.
Am I up next?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Bill.
So I think that there's a few different ways that you can look at the data. I think one way is sort of a good financial partner analysis. So for example, one of the things that I look at is how accrual reporting and WIP reporting matches up with the next invoice that I get the following month, because I am trying to get more visibility and predictability to my business partners inside the organization, so they know what's coming on. So I can kind of look at the data that my vendors are submitting to make sure that I'm keeping them honest. We can also leverage the analytical tools, and we can see, how much are we writing off from these various bills. But then also it depends on, as Raj pointed out, the journey and the path that you are moving towards. So for example, if you are taking what I would call the procurement approach, where you want to decrease and focus the work that you are outsourcing to a selected number of vendors, and you are of sufficient scale that you could ask for or negotiate volume discounts. As you're looking at these cost savings analysis and good financial partners sort of analysis, that guides your discussions in how you want to direct more and more of your legal spend to a certain cadre of specific legal vendors that are delivering cost efficiency, effectiveness, and then even giving them more of your business and negotiating further volume discounts, which is something that procurement is a great partner in implementing, because that's something that is squarely in their wheelhouse and that they've negotiated in other contexts.
Good. April, any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think those were all great points, and I would just dovetail what William has said about using the data to help reinforce corporate values. I mean, at the end of the day, corporations and in-house legal departments want to work with law firms that share their values. And so the values that I think data amplifies include compliance, right? Are you complying with the billing guidelines and the regulations that we have around our billing rules and what we will and will not pay for, or do we have to catch you, right? So that's one. Two is transparency. Are we being clear and transparent about what we think the cost of this matter is going to be, not just from the expense side, but also from the severity and liability perspective, to William's point? And are you communicating both? Because no legal department wants to be upside down, so to speak, spend more on a matter than it's actually worth to the business from a liability perspective. And so you want to remain transparent about that, because that's going to govern litigation philosophy or matter management philosophy on that particular matter. And I think ultimately that's where you want to be aligned. You want firms that can anticipate what your values are, what your sensitivities are from a matter management and litigation management perspective, based on these kind of conversations and review of the data together, so that we're becoming together more and more efficient. And I think that's ultimately how they get greater swaths of business. So I really think that's how data empowers discussions and partnerships between outside counsel and inside counsel.
That's terrific. Well, I know we just have a couple minutes left. Bill's brought up that great point about volume discounts. What's interesting is, as we see the hockey puck going farther, which is volume discounts was historically the one way that corporates would say, oh, we can leverage that. The reality is that the volume discount is just one arrow in the quiver. With actually AI-driven data, you actually need to know, like, that law firm partner has a lot more margin that they can cut, even if you're not even driving that much volume, because that's the beauty that data gives you, that leverage. Right now, if you don't really have data, you resort to basic concepts like, well, if I spend more, I get a discount. But what's interesting is, if you have benchmarks in a specific practice area by that partner, the leverage that you can drive. Now, it's a separate question as to whether or not you're going to use that leverage. That's a cultural change management point. But that is, again, the power that data can harness. We have just 2 minutes, and Rich asked this great question that I think, does anyone on the panel, were you able to see Rich's question? Obviously, Bill, you spoke to it, and I see, Adrienne, you did reply to it. Adrienne, do you maybe just want to hum a couple bars as we close out on Richard's question?
Sure. I think he mentioned his question, if you didn't see it, was
just about any alternatives to the billable
hourly
hour.
rates other than AFAs. Sure. And what I answered back was that I didn't think that the hourly rate had to go away. I think it just needs to be more controlled. And that's where the scoping comes in, and also using the historical data to identify what things should cost. And then hourly rate is still fine. As I do more and more AFAs, I look back and I think, AFA is really built on the hourly rate. It's just about controlling it. So we talk about AFAs. It's really more about, what are you trying to accomplish? What work needs to be done? And let's put it in a bucket and we call it an AFA, but it's really still based on the hourly rate by the firm. So it's kind of mixing and matching just the terminology. But I think that with a more concise scope, formal budgeting, formal legal project management, and flexibility. Because this is one thing I say to all the firms and the attorneys I work with. We can build an AFA, we can try to predict what's going to happen, but we know in certain types of work, it's never going to be that way. So we have to build some flexibility in it. So we have to have both parties be transparent, communicative, and managing the fact that if something changes, they have to both agree to manage that, either up or down.
Absolutely terrific. And you hit your time mark right on, Adrienne. That's great. Well, look, I know we're at time. I think we still have a great discussion going. Obviously, it's a topic that we could go on for a long time. Daniel from Boston Scientific just asked, actually gave a great suggestion that they use about they get free hours from and hotlines. Obviously, hotline secondments, time-proven tactics from law firms to get stickier with their corporate legal departments and good ROI for you all. So if you could, thank you, Sylvia, but really please join me in thanking this tremendous panel, April, Bill, and Adrienne. Absolutely terrific insights.